So thank you very much for meeting with us, Mr. Summers. Just to start, so you've worked with both the Clinton White House and the Obama White House. So Clinton very much the era of big government is over, but we've seen a lot of that rhetoric sort of fade away with the Obama administration. Do you think we're sort of back to the new big government era, or do you think that's just rhetoric?
I don't think we're anybody is for government's sake. I think the appropriate policies at any point in time depend upon the situation at that point in time. And if you look, the amount we're spending on core government has gone substantially down since President Clinton's time. The size of our population that is aged has gone substantially up. The relative price of things that governments buy, like healthcare and education, have risen very substantially. And so I think it's appropriate that with the common values, there be more emphasis on increasing government spending today in certain key areas than there might have been during President Clinton's time. I think it's also important to recognize that government spending is and should be countercyclical. And so in response to a substantial recession, an economic downturn like we've seen, the size of government expands substantially. So I think the differences have less to do with differences in values than they do with differences in economic circumstances.
Okay. So then, in light of the recent deficit reduction compromise talks and everything, would you lean then more towards austerity measures or raising revenues? Or do you think then, because of the times, we shouldn't focus on deficit reduction quite yet?
I think the right first priority has to be growth, addressing the jobs deficit, making necessary investments in the future. Once those investments have been made, I think the right priority probably becomes efforts to address the long run fiscal sustainability, and the sooner we can do that, the better. And most important, that'll involve efforts to contain healthcare costs.
Gotcha. So, in light of healthcare costs, do you think Obamacare goes far enough, or do you think we need to do more beyond that?
I think we're going to need to continue to look at ways of altering reimbursement procedures, changing incentives, so as to contain the spending on healthcare at a time when we spend a much larger share of our incomes and don't get obviously greater benefits than many others do.
So right now you're teaching a course on globalization. Obviously that's an ever-continuing topic. Is there anything you think America can do to better prepare for a new globalized economy?
You know, in a world that's going to be more competitive, it becomes more important that we invest as effectively as we can in what is our most special resource, which is our people. And that makes education at the center of any global economic strategy. It makes creating centers of excellence, whether it's the kind of center of excellence that Harvard represents in higher education, or it's the kind of center of excellence in information technology that Silicon Valley represents, those kinds of networks become important sources of advantage and competitive advantage for any country. And that will need to be a matter of increased attention in our economic policy going forward.
Gotcha. So you've recently left government work to come back to academia, and you're going to work soon in the future for the Center for American Progress. Anything that you think you'll be focusing on in the near future?
Well, I think the challenge is going to be to take the progressive tradition in economic policy, which is a tradition that judges things not just by the quantity of the economy, not just by the level of growth, but by what it translates into for middle-class families. And think in today's world with the mobile phone, with what's happened in transportation, with the ways in which technology is automating many areas of production, to think about how that will require the re-engineering of public policies. Just as the transition from an agricultural economy to an industrial economy led to changes in the structure of society and changes in the structure of policy, so also a change from an industrial economy to a knowledge economy will require changes in the structure of policy.
Sort of in relation to that industrial economy, around Harvard there's been a recent movement to divest our endowment, and a lot of other climate change policies have been very much initiated by student groups as opposed to current politicians. Do you think there's anything, at least from an economist standpoint, that would work wonders sort of to reduce carbon emissions and help the environment in the long haul?
I think in the whole, the pricing of energy resources and the pricing of sources of carbon is probably the most important thing for containing carbon. I don't think the ideas of divesting energy companies are particularly well thought out or particularly likely to be effective in some of the forms in which they're advocated. I think could do substantial financial damage to the university.
One final question. So one of the big things around Harvard's campus recently has been the Intro to Congress sort of scandal. No one knows Harvard better than you. Do you think there's any way we could have handled that better, perhaps?
You know, I think one of the things I learned when I was in as an administrator is that it's very easy to second guess from the outside and very hard to know enough when you're on the outside to really grapple with the problem. And so I don't really feel in a position to second guess the judgments that were made. I think it's a sad story for the students who were involved. I think it's a sad story that there was as much ambiguity in that situation as there was in the course that was taught, and I think it points towards the importance of everybody in the community, students and the approaches that they take, faculty in the way that they teach, administrators in departments in the way that they monitor the courses that are offered within them, stepping up their game and trying to do a better job.
Thank you very much, Mr. Summers.
Thank you.
Have a lovely day.
Thank you.